In the heart of southern China is a river said to be the most beautiful in the world. The 51-mile stretch of the Li River between Guilin and Yangshuo has inspired writers and artists for over 2,000 years. It's a land of unparalleled geological wonders. Almost 6 million acres of limestone, carved by wind and rain into dramatic peaks. And a mystical labyrinth of more than 3,000 caves. Home to a mosaic of different cultures, Guilin is known as the most scenic place under heaven. Guilin is often called the birthplace of Chinese landscape art. For centuries, artists traveling down the Li River have been inspired by the region's breathtaking scenery. A picture of the river's iconic peaks even adorns China's 20 yuan banknote. The silhouetted mountains and languid river are instantly recognizable to people throughout the nation. In subtropical southern China, the Li River flows 270 miles through a magnificent limestone landscape. The upper reaches are the most famous, a region of just 51 miles connecting Yangshuo and Guilin, one of the nation's most visited cities. Shrouded in mist and surrounded by scores of surreal towering mountains, a journey down the Li River begins at Guilin. The city was first established more than 2,000 years ago by Emperor Qin Shi Huang, best known for creating his army of terracotta warriors. Today, Guilin is a large, bustling city that attracts visitors from around the world, eager to see the river and iconic peaks, recently nominated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And one of the most famous peaks in Guilin is shaped like an elephant. Hunched by the river, the hill is said to look like a huge elephant drinking water through its outstretched trunk. A symbol of Guilin, Elephant Trunk Hill is said to have been created by the Jade Emperor, the ruler of heaven. According to legend, the Jade Emperor loved a celestial elephant, until one day the mighty pachyderm came down from heaven to help the people of Guilin during a time of famine. When the elephant ignored the furious emperor's demands to return home, a terrible battle began. After days of intense fighting, the elephant went to the river for a drink. Just as it stretched out its trunk, the vengeful emperor leapt onto its back and thrust down his sword, piercing the elephant's heart. At this, the elephant was transformed to stone and remains standing by the Li River today. People have been admiring Elephant Trunk Hill for centuries. Between the trunk and front legs of the elephant is a cave, and on its walls are 64 inscriptions praising the beauty of the hills and waters. Some of the words date back to the Tang Dynasty and are 1,400 years old. Elephant Trunk Hill may be the most famous limestone peak in Guilin, but there are more than 150 other iconic mountains in the region. And the best way to see them is by boat. Traditionally, flat-bottomed boats called sampans travel down the Li River, transporting goods between Guilin and Yangshuo. Today, travelers ride the ferries to get the best view of the unique scenery. And in Guilin, you need to look straight up. Precipitous peaks line the banks, rising dramatically from the flat river basin. Some of the limestone summits soar more than 650 feet high. The iconic peaks along the Li River are part of a much larger limestone region called the South China Karst. Extending over more than 200,000 square miles, parts of the South China Karst became World Heritage Sites in 2007, recognizing some of the finest examples of karst topography on the planet. The South China Karst is a vast and unique set of mountains, plains, and plateaus. The rocks not only have a superb aesthetic value, but also help scientists understand the evolution of the planet. The ethereal karst landscape has inspired an abundance of myths over Guilin's 2,000-year history. According to one legend, the mountains were once stones, carried from central China by conscripted laborers to fill up the South China Sea. The laborers only got as far as Guilin, and the stones have remained here ever since. For centuries, the people of China have revered this land, delighting in the landscape of conical limestone peaks, exquisitely mirrored in the river's smooth waters. According to 8th century poet Han Yu, the river forms a green gauze belt. The mountains are like jade hairpins. Scientists are also impressed by the mountains of Guilin. They see the jade hairpins as the eroded remains of an ancient seabed. For this stunning landscape has been 70 million years in the making. The iconic landscape of Guilin has been carved from a vast slab of limestone, twice the size of Colorado, covering much of southern China. The mountains surrounding the Li River were created by a unique combination of geological events that began 300 million years ago. This land was once at the bottom of an ancient sea. Over time, sediments containing the fossilized shells of countless tiny marine animals and plants formed a massive layer of limestone rock. "55 million years ago, India collided with Asia, creating the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau far to the west. The massive tectonic forces also pushed up the huge slab of limestone covering southern China. In places, the ancient layer of limestone was more than 3,000 feet thick. Over successive ice ages, the limestone landscape in other parts of China was scoured by glaciers. However, in Guilin, the rock was exposed to not ice, but monsoons. In the warm, wet climatic conditions, the land has been etched by water. Heavy summer monsoon rains, often exceeding 80 inches a year, drench the rock and start the weathering process. When rainwater seeps through leaves and soil, it picks up carbon dioxide, which turns water into carbonic acid. The acid reacts with limestone, dissolving the bedrock. In Guilin, the warm temperatures and thick vegetation produce particularly high concentrations of carbon dioxide in the water. So when the acidic groundwater seeps into fractures in the limestone, it aggressively enlarges crevices in the bedrock. The stone towers of Guilin are truly unique. It's the only place in the world where tectonic forces continue uplifting the limestone as the acidic groundwater gnaws at the base of each tower, cutting away the rock faster than the upper surfaces are eroded by the rain. It's estimated that Guilin's iconic landscape has been carved over the last 20 million years. The original slab of uplifted limestone, some 3,000 feet thick, has been slowly eroded at a rate of about 4 inches every millennium. The remaining towers of rock come in an infinite variety of shapes and sizes. The locals have given names to an assortment of strange sculpted mountains lining the Li River. There are peaks called Yearning for Husband Rock, Frog Crossing the River, and Rooster Fighting Hill. But equally spectacular sculptures can be found beneath the mountains. In Guilin, the acidic groundwater dissolves rocks underground, creating more than 3,000 extraordinary caves. Towering 200 feet above the Li River, Fubo Hill provides a panoramic view of the city of Guilin. Nestled among its iconic mountains, the immense limestone peaks appear solid, but they're actually riddled with holes. Caves are etched into the sides of the towers, formed by tributaries of the Li River when the water flowed at much higher levels than today. The same process of dissolving limestone that created the peaks also works underground. It's estimated there are over 3,000 caves in the Guilin region, and one of the most famous is found at the foot of Fubo Hill. According to legend, a man entering the cave found it was illuminated by a magnificent glowing pearl. The man took the pearl, unaware it belonged to a dragon king who flew into a terrible rage. The man's neighbors advised him to return the pearl at once, and dreading the dragon's revenge, the man went back into the cave. Nobody ever saw the man or the dragon again. But the legend lives on in the name, Pearl Returning Cave. But the largest and most spectacular cave near Guilin is the Reed Flute Cave. Its name comes from the reeds growing at the entrance to the cave that are used to make flutes and pipes. According to legend, a magician once lived in the cave and spent thousands of years carving the limestone stalactites into sculptures of animals. By playing a magic reed flute, the magician could bring the stalactites to life. And then, one day, a young girl stumbled into the cave. Delighted by the magician and his dancing sculptures, the young girl promised to keep the cave a secret. But, unable to contain her excitement, she told her neighbors, and word quickly spread until it reached the Dragon King of the ocean. The king sent troops to the cave, but rather than surrender his magic reed flute, the magician sealed the cave shut, keeping his sculptures safe for future generations to discover and admire. Today, the mythical magician is remembered in the names given to the cave's most spectacular features, including pines in the snow, rosy dawn on the Lion Hill, Dragon Pagoda, Hill of Flowers and Fruits, and the skyscraping twins. The cave was formed more than 500,000 years ago, when a corrosive trickle of rainwater seeped through tiny pores and cavities in the limestone, eating away at the rock. Cavities became cracks, allowing more water to enter and erode more rock. Eventually, an underground river flowed more than 750 feet through enormous underground chambers. extravagant subterranean sculptures all began with a single drop of water, saturated with minerals leached from the rock. When the drop falls, it leaves behind the faintest ring of limestone. Each subsequent drop that forms and falls deposits another limestone ring. Eventually, these rings form a very narrow hollow tube, commonly known as a soda straw. If the straw is plugged by debris, water begins flowing over the outside, depositing more limestone and building a cone-shaped stalactite. The same water drops that fall from the tip of a stalactite deposit more limestone on the floor below, eventually resulting in a rounded stalagmite. Given enough time, these formations can meet and fuse to create columns. Some of the earliest visitors to the Reed Flute Cave arrived more than 1,100 years ago in the Tang Dynasty. Poets left more than 170 eloquent tributes carved into the walls. But over the centuries, many people forgot about the vast complex buried beneath Guilin. The reeds growing at the entrance made the cave hard to find, so it became an ideal hideout, providing a sanctuary for the locals as recently as World War II. Some chambers cover an area of 160,000 square feet with a 50-foot ceiling, so there was enough room to set up hospitals, printing plants, a newspaper, and even a theatrical company. The Reed Flute Cave was only open to the public in 1962. Called the Palace of Natural Arts, the cave's fame quickly spread around the nation. But Guilin is famous for more than just its outstanding limestone landscapes. A boat trip from Guilin down the Lee River passes scenes from the ancient past. For 1,300 years, people have fished the river using a most remarkable technique. Instead of using nets, lures, or lines, these fishermen use cormorants. The birds dive with a small noose around their neck, preventing them from swallowing large fish. When they return to the raft, the fisherman retrieves the fish, rewarding the bird with every 7th fish caught. When not fishing, the domesticated cormorants are treated like members of the family. Birds and humans even dine together. There are other unusual domesticated animals also working along the Lee River. In the lush subtropical climate, the land is farmed using traditional methods, and water buffalo do the heavy work of lifting and plowing. Every day, farmers lead their water buffalo down to the river to bathe and drink. River flows through some of the most fertile land in all of China. Agriculture is the major industry in this province, even though only 12% of the total land area is suitable for farming. The rugged mountains look spectacular, but it's the fertile river valleys that feed the nation. The Li River flows through the province of Guangxi, which is the largest sugar-producing region in China. Accounting for 66% of the country's total sugar production, more than 2.5 million acres of sugarcane were planted in 2010. More than 7 million tons of sugar are produced in Guangxi, enough to satisfy the domestic demand for all of China. For centuries, China has sustained its large and growing population through agricultural technology. With only 7% of the world's cultivated land, China has to feed 1/5 of the world's population. So nothing goes to waste. In Guangxi, there was a time when farmers, having harvested the sugarcane, burned the discarded leaves in the field, causing severe air pollution. But in 2010, China fired up its first power plant fueled by sugarcane leaves. By burning more than 200,000 tons of agricultural waste each year, the station generates 180 million kilowatt hours of electricity. Using sugarcane as fuel cuts carbon dioxide emissions by 100,000 tons, compared to similar-sized coal-fired power plants. Sugarcane grows best at low altitudes, preferably on flat land. But as more than 70% of Guangxi province is hilly terrain, people found a way to grow a different crop on land once fit for only a few nimble goats. China was one of the earliest countries in the world to grow rice, with a history of cultivation stretching back at least 8,000 years. People planted rice in the mountains of Guilin thanks to an incredible system of intricate terraces completed during the Ming Dynasty more than 500 years ago. More than 16,000 acres of terraced fields were carved into the steep mountainside, up to 1,100 feet above sea level. A complex system of dams, sluices, channels, and bamboo pipes brings water from the top of the mountain to irrigate the plants in each terrace. From a distance, the rice terraces were once thought to resemble the scales of a dragon, covering the flanks of a mountain range with a summit resembling a dragon's spine. which is why the region is called the Dragonback Rice Terrace. Retained by an intricate network of stone walls, the curving terraces match the contours of the landscape. In an ancient example of soil conservation, the terraces prevent the runoff of nutrients when the channels are flooded with water. The narrowest terraces are wide enough to fit only 2 or 3 plants, but spread across a vast area of the mountainside, the region still produces more than enough rice to support the local people. The Dragonback rice terraces were built by the Zhuang people, China's largest ethnic minority. In Guilin today, the lives of the Zhuang are still intertwined around the Li River. In Guilin, the fertile land on either side of the Li River is home to 13 different ethnic groups. The largest ethnic minority are the Zhuang people, famous throughout China for their art, culture, and singing. Every year, on the 3rd day of the 3rd month, locals gather beside the river to take part in a singing competition. The festival honors the memory of one of the most famous singers in China. A legendary figure in Zhuang folklore, a beautiful young woman called Liu Sanjia was a singing prodigy. Said to have the voice of a lark, she used her gift for lyrics to sing about social injustices. This upset a local gangster who wanted her as his concubine. When the gangster and his ruffians tried to take her by force, villagers rushed to protect her. She escaped and ultimately found freedom when she was transformed into a lark. Guangxi province can justifiably claim to be the land of song. Almost every ethnic group holds an annual song festival. In the mountains, the Yao ethnic minority are farmers with a magnificent oral tradition. Singing forms an indispensable part of their life. But the Yao are more famous for their hair. According to local tradition, Yao women can only cut their hair once, when they're 16 years old. The cut hair is used as an extravagantly long hairpiece, except when it becomes part of a most unusual dance. When a young woman gets the only haircut in her life, It's a rite of passage into adulthood. The Yao traditionally believe that a woman's spirit resides in her hair. In 2004, a Yao woman from Guangxi entered the Guinness Book of Records with hair that measured more than 18 feet long. A Yao woman's hairstyle depends on her social status. There are distinctive dues for maidens, married mothers, and grandmothers. Unwed women wrap their hair like a turban around their heads because traditionally their grooms should be the first to cast eyes on their uncovered hair. The Yao may be famous for their remarkable hair, but it was the songs of another ethnic group that achieved UNESCO World Heritage status. The Dong minority are internationally renowned for their polyphonic choir singing. In 2009, in an attempt to preserve the unique tradition, UNESCO enlisted the Great Songs of the Dong as part of the World Intangible Heritage Program. Part recitation and part chant, the complex Dong choral songs are rhymed poems, a way of transmitting their culture down the ages. In Guilin, all the diverse ethnic groups living along the Li River share a deep respect for nature. This is a landscape that inspires reverence. But away from Guilin, 51 miles downriver in the city of Yangshuo, the locals have a saying: Guilin's scenery is the most beautiful in the world. But Yangshuo's scenery is the best in Guilin. Famous throughout China for its breathtaking scenery, the city of Guilin was once the capital of the province and the center of the region's culture, politics, and history. Most people overlook the sleepy little village not far downstream. On the banks of the Li River, 51 miles from Guilin, is the far less famous Yangshuo. But in the last 20 years, the town has been transformed. To avoid the crowds in Guilin, foreigners started visiting Yangshuo, where they could get closer to the dramatic landscape. Yangshuo quickly became a major backpacker destination to rival any town in Southeast Asia. But despite the influx of visitors, Yangshuo retained much of its essential character through careful planning. Buildings could not be higher than 7 stories, lest they block the views of the limestone mountains. As a result, the sleepy village of Yangshuo has become one of the top destinations for travelers in all of China. Yangshuo is now an exotic blend of cultures where East meets West and has gained a reputation as being a tiny global village in southern China. The noise and excitement of the main street can make it difficult to appreciate the tranquil beauty of the surrounding landscape. Even the Li River can be chaotic, as ferries jostle for position at the Yangshuo docks. So many visitors arriving in Yangshuo decide to head into the countryside to explore the remarkable landscape, either by hiking, cycling, or rock climbing. But most visitors prefer to leave the industrialized world far behind and take a trip into the past using traditional transport. People can float down a small forgotten tributary of the Li River on traditional bamboo rafts. Made from curving 12-foot-long bamboo poles, the rafts are unsinkable and surprisingly stable. But this is not adventurous whitewater rafting. The chairs are comfortable, and the river is gentle and shallow. Local gondoliers propel the rafts using 15-foot bamboo poles. Out on the river, motorized boats are forbidden, so the only sounds come from the locals going about their daily routines, surrounded by the spectacular limestone peaks. The serenity is only interrupted where farmers have built breakwaters for their animals to cross the river. For centuries, everyone from emperors to artists have cruised down the Li River, astonished and inspired by the extraordinary landscape. Fan Chengde, one of the best-known poets of the Song dynasty, once wrote, "I often sent pictures I painted of the hills of Guilin to friends back home, but few believed what they saw." More than 900 years later, and little has changed. Pictures of the limestone landscape remain unbelievably beautiful, which is why Guilin is still one of the most beloved places in the land of the dragon.